me see if this sounds familiar to you. Fundraising is always on your mind, but for some reason, it gets pushed back on the list of things to do, maybe to next week or maybe even next month. And it's not because you don't care, it's because something else always feels more urgent in that moment. Now, you know, fundraising matters, but it never screams the loudest. And leaders feel guilty about that. So let's talk about why fundraising ends up here and how we can finally fix it and fix it in a way so you're not working more hours and you're not becoming someone that you're not. That is our focus. Let's huddle up. Hey, welcome to another episode of Huddle Up with Mark, the Fun Coach. I'm Mark Duncan. And today we're going to dive into a topic that I know is very, very common for many of you as nonprofit leaders. You know that you need to engage in this fundraising. You know, and maybe because you've heard it from me or you just know intuitively, that you need to engage in relationship fundraising. You need to connect with people. You need to be able to secure the gifts that you need so that your organization can thrive or go to the next level. But for some reason, you tend to push this high priority thing back and it becomes less urgent. And so let's talk about the difference between urgent and important. Okay. So when we look at things that are urgent, we think about things like crises. You know, these are emergencies that come up, or we're looking at emails that we need to respond to immediately. And that happens, right? Staff issues that come up, whether it's an emergency or there's an urgent matter with staff. Maybe somebody is called out, or maybe there's a disciplinary issue you need to deal with, or they're having a problem that you need to help them with. That is urgent. Any fires that you need to put out related to programs that you're running, those are urgent matters, right? Now let's talk about important. What's important? Well, relationship fundraising is important, but may not feel urgent. Long-term sustainability is important, and donor trust also important. And these are things that you know are important, but somehow they don't rise to the level of urgency. And fundraising rarely feels urgent because the consequences of fundraising are typically delayed. So when you're beginning the process of building a relationship with somebody that you know has the capacity to give, you're not going to get that $50,000 gift or $100,000 gift right away. You know, you need to work up to that. You need to build that trust. You need to build that relationship to be able to start creating that sustainability. And it's even worse when we're talking about planned gifts, right? These are gifts that are coming from individuals who have the capacity to plan in their estate to continue to support the work that you're doing. But you have to wait to receive that, obviously. And so this is why fundraising becomes less urgent, because the actual outcomes can be delayed. Now, they don't have to be that delayed, because once you get into this process of building trusting relationships with people who have capacity, the gifts are going to come. And not because you just happen to, say the right things. It's because you asked, right? Ultimately, that is what you have to do, is you have to ask. So you've got to understand that you don't feel this pain today, but in 6 months from now, you may feel the pain of not taking action now to secure gifts that will be in your hand 6 months from now. But then when you realize that things are in crisis, it will be too late, or it's going to feel like a surprise to you because it wasn't something that you were expecting, even though technically it wasn't, because you know your budget, you know how your expenses are going, you know exactly each month what your income and expenses look like. You should know how to be able to pace your income so that it is keeping up with expenses, or more importantly, exceeding expenses. And if you're an organization that is a fee for service organization, you may be able to plan for that in ways that will work. And in some cases, you may be a uh, a fee for service organization that is highly reliant on seasonal income, meaning that certain times of the year your income is higher, and certain times of the year your income is lower. So how do you balance that? And this is where fundraising, relationship fundraising, can be very, very helpful, because generally speaking, you don't see those kinds of seasons in fundraising. Yes, we see more money flow into organizations between October and December. And maybe we start to see that in the spring as well. But again, that's the transactional fundraising. I'm talking about relationship fundraising. And when you're engaged in relationship fundraising, you can control the pace in which those dollars land on your books, because you can ask people if they'd be willing to make a commitment every year, or have that annual commitment happen in January, February, and March. And if you work that process with each of those donors the right way, then you're going to be able to create that sustainable funding that you need to do the things that you need to do. Now, let's talk about why it's easy to avoid fundraising. Fundraising itself, regardless of how you look at it, and I'm talking about relationship fundraising, has an emotional demand on us, right? And it's because we know we're going to be in the process of asking, sometimes waiting. We may feel vulnerable because we're putting ourselves in a position to ask. We may feel like we're begging for a gift. And so there's an emotional toll that comes with this if you aren't prepared in the right way to do this and lean into it well. You see, there's no immediate feedback either that you can get from fundraising. Again, it takes time. And so there's no instantaneous feeling of, oh, great, I'm done, move on to the next thing. It is an ongoing process. And of course, let's not overlook the resistance and the fear of rejection, awkwardness, self doubt, lack of worthiness, all of these feelings that come up that add to this emotional toll that this takes on us. And so I'm not overlooking that. I'm not suggesting that you overlook it, because it is real. The question is, are you going to do the things that you need to do in spite of that? Because while those things are real, they're real to you. They're not real to your donors. And so we don't have to avoid fundraising because it's unimportant. We're avoiding it because it's uncomfortable. You see the difference here? See, we wind up avoiding it because it doesn't feel urgent. and therefore doesn't feel important in that moment, especially if everything's going fine financially. But at the end of the day, the avoidance is coming from a lack of comfort. And we have to face that. And this is especially true for mission first leaders. These are leaders, and maybe you fall in this category, but you got into this business because of what you want to deliver to the people that you serve. You got into this business because there's a problem that you want to solve. And as the executive director, you want to be able to lead the organization to make sure that the people being served by it are actually getting everything that they need, whether that be services or programs or whatever it is that you do to meet your mission. And so, those of us who are mission minded leaders who are led by mission first, this is especially true for you in terms of that discomfort. And then, of course, there's the ones who didn't come up through fundraising. They didn't come up through the development area. It's particularly uncomfortable. Now, for me, I did not come up through the development area, or I didn't see, I had hints of that when I was not an executive director. I got to see a fundraising campaign unfold, and it just piqued my interest. That's all. I didn't learn a whole lot from that process other than, that's interesting. And oh, wow, there's great potential here to be able to secure funds at any level. That was what was exciting to me. So when I became an executive director, I did jump on that opportunity and I made it a priority. But I'm not normal when it comes to this. And I recognize that. And this is precisely why I do what I do, because I know that for most, this is a challenge. And you know that you want to, need to, have to be able to make this work in order to get your organization to the next level. And this has to be done through relationship fundraising. Now, there are many of you that are probably doing fundraising events that are doing well. Maybe you're netting six figures and you're satisfied with that, coupled with maybe some transactional fundraising initiatives, right? So these are all, meaning direct mail or 24-hour giving day, like Giving Tuesday or something along those lines, right, is what is allowing you to be able to raise the money that you need. But we all learned from the pandemic how vulnerable events are. Because when the pandemic hit, many organizations had to stop doing fundraising events. And that was a huge challenge and created a huge issue for many organizations who lost six figures in revenue because of that. And let's not mention those fee-for-service nonprofit organizations, those of you who rely on in-person services, who had to pivot or stop providing those services and therefore stopping the revenue. But here's the one thing during the pandemic that didn't stop if you either were already engaged in it or you were starting to engage it, and that was relationship fundraising. Because if you had already established the base for relationship fundraising, then you were well off on your way. The relationships were in place. The trust was in place. And now you had this crisis that was unavoidable that you could lean into to ask so that people can give and keep things going during the pandemic. And we saw this happen with a lot of organizations. But the pandemic is not something that is going to happen all the time. So can't rely on that. But you also can't rely on just one thing from a philanthropic perspective. Your fundraising needs to be well rounded, and it should include relationship fundraising, but it should include other things. Direct mail. Yes, the 24-hour giving day. Yes, maybe even events, although not necessary. Those can be leveraged in a way that will strengthen your relationship fundraising. In fact, that's the whole reason why we engage in the transactional aspect of fundraising, because it's so easy to convert those donors, those who have capacity, into relationship based giving donors who will give significantly when approached and asked. But here's what happens when fundraising gets postponed, right? When we keep putting it off because of all the things that I mentioned. Sometimes programs can stall, leaders can burn out, and emergency mode becomes normal because you're constantly pushing things uphill, constantly struggling to get to where you need to be. And this is a vicious cycle to be in. So if fundraising is optional on your calendar, sustainability is also optional for your organization. Let me say that again. If fundraising is optional on your calendar, then so is sustainability. That too is optional for your organization. But you'll let that sit without judgment. Let that land. We have to lean into this. We have to take the steps to engage in the most effective way to raise money. Hands down. It's better than grants. It's better than events. It's better than direct mail. It's better than the 24-hour giving campaigns. Those are all things that tee you up for relationship fundraising, because those are ways that people self-identify as being interested in supporting your organization, but they're not going to make a $10, $20, $50,000 gift during Giving Tuesday. But they will if you lean into a relationship with them and ask them to give at that level. You see the difference here. Okay. I'm trying to create a sense of urgency here so that you understand the importance of relationship fundraising. You see, fundraising is not a task. It's not something you check off on the list. It is a leadership responsibility. Donors don't give to spreadsheets. They give to leaders that they trust. And they trust them because they know that you're doing the right things for the people that you serve. And when you avoid fundraising, you're not being humble. You're being absent. You're being absent. And when you look into the future, you are not doing your organization, your mission, a service because it feels comfortable in the moment to avoid this. But 10, 15, 30 years from now, your organization could be in the same place or perhaps not even exist if you don't take the steps that you need to create this sustainable philanthropic support that is right there in front of you if you do the right things. So while you are dealing with this now, once you establish a sustainable source of revenue from philanthropic support, you'll be able to sustain that for years and years and years to come, whether you're in that seat or not. meaning that you are teeing up the person who will follow you so that they will be successful as well. Critically important. The most responsible thing you can do for your mission is lead its fundraising. You know as well as I do that organizations need resources, financial resources, to do the things that they do for the people that they serve. Hands down, there's no way around it. Sure, you might be able to get volunteer support to be able to do that, but you're going to need materials. You're going to need other kinds of resources to be able to make that happen. And how sustainable are volunteers when they're volunteering? They have the right to opt out and opt out without a whole lot of notice. They have a right to move on to something else. You need to create that sustainable philanthropic support, that sustainable financial security that is going to help you thrive as an organization. Now, relationship fundraising does not equal a certain number of hours every day. Right? That's not what we're doing here. We're not, I'm going to spend it. It's one call, it's one meeting, it's one follow up, it's one making the case, one making the ask, and one closing the deal. That's what you're doing. You're engaged in a relationship with this person and a number of them, right? To be able to secure these gifts. Got to lean in and build these trusting relationships. And they're right there. If you're an organization that's been around for at least 5 or 6 years and you have a donor base and you haven't screened that donor base to see where there might be capacity, then you're not leveraging what's right in front of you to be able to take your fundraising to the next level. Because I'm pretty sure you've got some people who are part of your constituency that have the capacity to give in a significant way. They're not going to just do it. They're only going to do it when you ask them to. So now we need to move fundraising from important to also being important and urgent. And not urgent in a way that is you're out there, oh my gosh, we need money in the door today. This is about you building the habit of building those relationships on a regular basis, meeting with people, building trust, listening to them, and ultimately asking them to give. So fundraising belongs on the calendar, and it should be on your calendar before the week fills up. So as you're planning your week, plan when you are going to actually make those calls. Move that around. Take some time in the morning one day. Take some time in the afternoon another day. Take some time in the evening another day. Yes, it isn't going to hurt you either to stay late or to take phone calls at home where you make 4 or 5 calls, where you may catch people because they're not in the middle of the busyness of their day, and they may answer your call. We've got to work this into your daily system. So if it's not on your schedule, it's not real. Right? We operate, even in this moment that I'm recording this, it's actually on my calendar. Record podcast episode. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Got to plan for these things. So I'm going to make some suggestions. I think you should block anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes a week solely for fundraising. And that's to get you to make calls. Ideally, 20% of your time should be spent in this relationship fundraising space. What is that equivalent to in a 5-day week? It's equivalent to 1 day a week. You can spread those 8 hours out, right, over the course of a week. But I'd like you to start with 60 to 90 minutes so that you can at least get into the habit of reaching out to people and setting up those calls with them. And a win isn't always a gift. A win is meaningful conversation, right? You're moving things along. It's a clearer relationship. So maybe you really didn't know this person that well. Now you're getting to know them better. And it's deepening trust, right? Especially trust in you as a leader from that particular donor. So you don't always measure leadership by outcomes, especially outcomes you can't control. You measure it by actions that you take. And so leading into these relationships, making time for fundraising, making it urgent as well as important is critical to your success. So I hope this has been helpful to you. This has been a typically longer episode, but man, I really wanted to hit on this topic because so many of you are avoiding this because of other urgent things that are coming up on in your day, and it gets pushed back to the next day, the next week, the next month, and then next thing you know, your fiscal year is almost over and you didn't get to raise what you budgeted to raise because you came into the year thinking that you were going to do this, but then it kept getting away from you. And it happens time and time and time and time again, year after year. But you can make that change, especially now. We're early in the calendar year, regardless of when your fiscal year is. You can start today. Hope this has been helpful. And as always, this fundraising thing, it's not about the dollars. It's about what the dollars do for the people that you serve. Thanks. And we'll see you next time.